Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into the velvet-draped, faintly scented world of Victorian love. If you think modern dating is stressful, try wooing someone in a time when ankle exposure was scandalous. Letters took 3 days to deliver, and your best shot at a hot date was awkwardly making eye contact at a funeral. The Victorians were the inventors of the postage stamp, the love seat, and about a dozen rules on how to say hello without accidentally proposing marriage. So before you get comfortable, go ahead and like and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this absurd historical rabbit hole. Leave a comment telling me whether you have ever sent a risky text, only to realize you might soon share the same fate as the astronomer CEO at the Coldplay concert. Now, dim the lights, maybe put a fan on for that calming hum, and get cozy. Prop yourself up with as many pillows as you need to feel slightly wealthier than you actually are. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered how Victorians actually dated? Was courtship just a series of slow-motion handkerchief drops? Did people really fall in love after one walk around the duck pond? Could you survive a dinner party with 12 courses and 0 Wi-Fi? Would you make it through a love letter without accidentally declaring war on Belgium? Did anyone ever elope? Or did they just lose the will to live during a particularly long poetry reading? And, most importantly, how long would you last before being exiled for using the wrong salad fork? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1857. The air smells like coal dust, lavender water, and existential dread. You're surrounded by lace, social anxiety, and the kind of romantic tension you usually only find in a Jane Austen adaptation. Good luck. The sun creeps through heavy curtains, illuminating your meticulously embroidered pillowcase and a room that smells faintly of lavender sachets and whatever the chimney sweep missed last week. You wake in a world where personal hygiene is more aspiration than achievement, and the most intimate thing you own is probably your nightcap. Before your feet have even touched the icy floorboards, you're already aware of the gentle tension in the air, a kind of ambient anxiety reserved for people who fear being judged by their bed linens. In Victorian England, how you greet the day says everything about you, from the colour of your dressing gown to the precise volume of your morning sigh. The goal is to project an air of dignity and self-control, even when your hair is performing its own private rebellion against order. You try not to breathe too deeply, which is wise, given the twin threats of coal smoke and a mouth that tastes like the inside of a mothball tin. Toothpaste exists, but it's mostly chalk, soot, or baking soda, applied with a brush that looks suspiciously like a torture device. You make a half-hearted attempt at freshness, scrubbing away while studiously ignoring the fact that your dentist, if you have one, also moonlights as a barber and possibly a part-time bone setter. As you contemplate getting out of bed, you notice the weight of your nightclothes. Flannel for warmth, lace for respectability, and a ruffle for each repressed emotion. Removing them requires strategy, agility, and the ability to pretend you aren't freezing to death. Your chamber is cold enough to discourage ambition. Central heating is a fantasy, so you rely on last night's embers and the hope that at least one household servant made it out of bed before you. You sit up, wrap yourself in a shawl, and survey your surroundings. The wallpaper is floral, but not in a relaxing way, more like a subtle reminder that you are never truly alone, not even in your own bedroom. There are family portraits everywhere, most of them featuring relatives who look mildly disappointed in you for sleeping past sunrise. Even the clock on the mantel seems judgy. Now comes the delicate matter of your morning attire. Statistically speaking, someone in your extended social circle is always dead, dying, or about to be memorialized, so you keep a set of black clothes ready at all times. Mourning is less an emotion than a wardrobe commitment. If you're lucky, you're only in half mourning, which means you get to wear lavender or grey instead of full soul-crushing black. Either way, you dress for the part, hoping you don't mix up your crepe trims and accidentally insult Aunt Matilda's memory. You perform your morning toilette with the grace of someone who knows that, at any moment, a servant could burst in holding a tray and news of yet another distant cousin's demise. A quick splash from the porcelain basin, a ritual that does very little for actual cleanliness but does wonders for keeping up appearances. You dab on rosewater or bay rum, depending on whether you're hoping to smell expensive or just conscious. Outside your window, the city stirs. The clatter of hooves, the faint shouting of newsboys, and the soft thump of someone delivering fresh milk, unless, of course, it's the undertaker, in which case you're about to have a very busy week. Your thoughts drift, briefly, to romance. Is today the day you lock eyes with a mysterious stranger over a shared loaf of bread? More likely, you'll spend half the morning trying to find a glove that isn't in mourning itself. Finally, you stand and pull back the curtains. A faint greyish light filters in, promising nothing except that the day has, in fact, begun. You are now fully prepared to begin the delicate, exhausting business of being Victorian. Perfectly poised, mildly anxious, and wrapped in enough fabric to smother even your deepest, most inappropriate thoughts. And that's just before breakfast. You trudge to the breakfast table in a robe that covers everything but your hopes and dreams. Conversation is polite, tepid, and studiously avoids mentioning feelings. Your mother eyes you over her porridge, already mentally assigning you a spouse based on the firmness of your toast. You sit down at a table that groans beneath the weight of ritual, not actual food. Every surface is covered in starched linen, silverware polished to a blinding sheen, and at least 2 vases of flowers that, like your Aunt Priscilla, are only here to fill space and quietly judge you. The air is thick, with a blend of boiled eggs, burnt toast, and the unspoken tension that comes from sharing a table with people who know you used to wet the bed. The morning newspaper sits untouched by your father, who prefers to open it dramatically, as if the mere act of unfolding paper might startle the servants into giving him a better cup of tea. He does not speak. He grunts. You are not sure if this is approval, or just what happens when someone chews Victorian-era bacon for too long. A tepid cup of tea is poured. You wonder briefly if this is the same water that was used to boil the socks last night. Your sibling makes eye contact just long enough to remind you of that one time you embarrassed yourself at a garden party. Nobody talks about politics, religion, or, heaven forbid, love. Instead, you're left to ponder the eternal mysteries of, is this marmalade, or just a very ambitious orange? Your mother, meanwhile, is a master at breakfast matchmaking. She doesn't need to say anything out loud. Her gaze flicks from your face to the toast, from your hair to your posture, from your spoon technique to the list of eligible bachelors she keeps in her mental filing cabinet. She knows which local curate's nephew is visiting from the country and has already judged, sight unseen, that his ears are probably a bit too red. Every bite of porridge is a silent audition for future happiness. Are you graceful with your spoon? Do you butter your toast with the proper sense of restrained yearning? Can you hold a teacup in a way that suggests both dignity and an openness to gentle courtship? The stakes are high. One rogue crumb, one ill-timed sneeze, and you might find yourself married off to Cousin Alfred, who collects taxidermied frogs and smells faintly of shoe polish. Conversation at the table follows the strictly enforced Victorian rulebook of neutral banter. Topics may include the weather, unacceptable unless dire, the garden, only if nothing has died, and any upcoming funerals which count as social events if you serve enough sandwiches. Your father occasionally ventures a remark about the state of the roads or the alarming rise in horse theft. Your job is to nod, smile, and try not to let your thoughts wander to last night's romantic novel hidden under your pillow. But underneath all this surface-level serenity, the true machinery of Victorian romance is hard at work. Every tap of a spoon, every measured glance, is a coded message. Is your sibling's friend invited for Sunday luncheon? Was that an accidental brush of hands, or just the result of aggressive marmalade reaching? When the toast is passed, fingers linger just a heartbeat longer. In a world where direct speech is practically illegal, these tiny moments are the love letters of breakfast. You finish your meal, appetite dulled by nerves, and 3 servings of social anxiety. As the family stands, everyone at exactly the same time, as if choreographed by a slightly neurotic drill sergeant, your mother delivers her verdict. We must invite the vicar's niece for tea. She plays the harp, apparently. You have never wanted tea less. You make your escape, grateful that breakfast only comes once a day, and vaguely aware that your romantic fate may, in fact, depend on the next time someone offers you the marmalade. Welcome to love, Victorian style. Slow, subtle, and always just slightly undercooked. Love starts with layers. Getting ready for romance involves enough fabric to upholster a small sofa, tight laces, and the ever-present threat of fainting before you even make it out the door. Is it attraction, or are you just struggling to breathe? Only time, and your tailor, will tell. You begin the process long before the actual event, because in Victorian England, getting dressed is less of a task and more of a competitive endurance sport. There are rules, there is an order. There are at least 3 relatives offering advice, none of whom you invited into your bedroom. You are at the mercy of tradition, fashion, and gravity. If you are a woman, your day starts with the basic linen chemise. It's the only thing standing between you and a lifetime of chafing. Next comes the corset, a marvel of engineering designed to turn your ribcage into a delicate hourglass, or, depending on the day, a sturdy fruit bowl. Your mother laces you up with the cheerful enthusiasm of someone tying down cargo on a stormy sea. You inhale, you exhale. You lose feeling in your toes, but on the bright side, your waist now fits the popular can be encircled by a man's hands and at least one moral dilemma standard. If you are a man, you're not exactly off the hook. Your version of suffering involves the cravat, a length of starched linen wound around your neck with the loving precision of a boa constrictor. Tying it is a test of patience, dexterity, and how many curse words you know in French. Every fold, tuck, and knot is an opportunity to demonstrate your taste, your income, and, if you're not careful, your ability to feint with style. Layer by layer, the absurdity increases. For women, petticoats, sometimes 5 or 6, each one heavier than the last. Bustles, for creating the correct silhouette, ideal for attracting suitors and for hiding emergency snacks. Stockings are pulled up and secured with garters that exist solely to betray you at inopportune moments. Over all this goes the dress itself, ruffles, lace, bows, and so many buttons that you start to suspect Victorian courtship was invented as a way to have someone around to help undo your outfit at the end of the day. Men face trousers, waistcoats, jackets, and, if you're particularly unlucky, stiff collars so high they might as well be guillotines. The top hat sits ready by the door, daring you to balance dignity with the knowledge that a stiff breeze could send your entire romantic future tumbling down the street. And then there's the hair. For women, it's a feat of architecture, pinned, curled, and sprayed with enough oil to lubricate a small locomotive. For men, it's pomade and a comb, and the sincere hope that your sideburns don't make you look like a disgraced walrus. If you have facial hair, congratulations, you are now a fashion statement, a political stance, and a possible fire hazard. Jewelry, gloves, brooches, handkerchiefs, each piece carefully chosen, each with its own coded message. A glove dropped is an invitation. A brooch pinned too high is a declaration of war on your mother's sense of proportion. The right accessories could make or break an engagement, or at least inspire a few pointed remarks at tea. By the time you're finally dressed, you are exhausted, half numb, and deeply suspicious that romance is a myth invented by haberdashers. The mirror shows you a vision of beauty and suffocation, poise and barely repressed panic. Is your heart fluttering because of love, or because your corset is pressing on your internal organs? Either way, you are now ready to brave the outside world, a living, breathing symbol of Victorian desire, anxiety, and excellent posture. You step into the hallway, head held high, fingers tingling, and lungs cautiously optimistic. If anyone asks, you're ready for love. If they don't ask, You'll just be here, quietly passing out in the drawing room. If you want to see your beloved, you'll have to endure the Victorian walk. You, your crush, and, just to kill the mood, someone's great aunt, waddling 3 paces behind like a well-dressed shadow. You're allowed 2 words and no direct eye contact. Intense stuff. You fantasized about this moment last night, lying awake with visions of moonlit romance, passionate whispers, maybe even a secret touch of fingertips under the old oak. The reality? You're outside in broad daylight, boots squelching in mud, birds providing a soundtrack, and your companion's chaperone trailing behind like the world's slowest security drone. It's less forbidden tryst, more awkward field trip with bonus lace bonnets. Your route has been carefully selected for maximum visibility and minimum scandal. The public path along the high street, where Mrs. Turnwell's curtains twitch like a Victorian polygraph, is out. The garden's shrubbery maze? Too private, unless you'd like to get a reputation for being fast. Which, in Victorian England, is only slightly worse than being a pickpocket. Instead, you're stuck doing slow circuits around the ornamental pond, accompanied by the relentless commentary of ducks, all while pretending the chaperone is part of the landscape. The conversation is, of course, strictly regulated. Weather, safe. Flowers, safe. But only if you avoid anything with accidental double meanings. One wrong word about blossoms and suddenly you're engaged. You attempt small talk. The air is brisk today. Your beloved replies, "Yes, quite." The chaperone clears her throat in a way that suggests you might want to try again, but only with more formality and less chemistry. You keep your hands clasped tightly behind your back, channeling all your romantic energy into occasionally glancing at your beloved's shoes. No hand-holding, no accidental brushes of fingers, unless you're keen to see the inside of a vicar's office by tea time. If you feel a flutter in your chest, it's probably just the tightness of your collar, or perhaps the mild panic of realizing you have nothing to say that won't result in 6 months of rumor and the possible revocation of your library card. The chaperone, always a relative, never a friend, has her own system for policing your virtue. Sometimes she walks ahead, pretending to admire the roses, but always with one ear turned backwards like a human satellite dish. Sometimes she falls behind, tripping delicately over gravel, but you know better than to risk even a whisper. Occasionally she interjects with a story about her own courtship, which seems to have lasted 19 years and involved precisely 0 moments of fun. If you manage to sneak a sideways glance at your beloved, you'll see their eyes dart away, cheeks flushed with the effort of appearing completely uninterested. It's the world's most emotionally charged walk, featuring all the thrill of a romantic hostage exchange. Occasionally, the chaperone will allow you both to pause and admire a statue, which is your chance to mutter something daring, like, "That's a fine statue." If you're feeling especially bold, you might mention the weather a second time. Be careful. Any more excitement and you might have to lie down. The real thrill comes in coded language. A compliment to a bonnet that means "I adore you." A pause by the azaleas that says, "Meet me at the next garden party." A carefully timed cough, which in some circles is a declaration of undying love, or possibly a symptom of consumption. It's hard to tell. By the end of the stroll, you're emotionally exhausted. You've exchanged approximately 14 words, 3 fleeting glances, and 1 shared moment of panic when a passing dog barked at your chaperone's skirt. Romance in the Victorian era isn't about physical contact or passionate declarations. It's about the ability to survive an entire afternoon of intense longing while never breaking the rules. Congratulations, you've completed your supervised walk. No scandals, no elopements, just a deep respect for the courage of your ancestors and the stamina of their great aunts. Forget emojis. Your options are ink, quill, and a dangerous amount of overthinking. Each sentence must be romantic but not too forward. Cross out 1 adjective and you've accidentally proposed. Add a stray flourish and you're legally married in Scotland. You settle down at your writing desk, a battleground of frayed nerves and dried up ink. Outside, the rain taps insistently at the window, perfect weather for brooding, or for penning the kind of love letter that will be read aloud by a blushing aunt and judged by 3 generations, living and dead. Your desk is a chaos of paper scraps, half-written drafts, and at least one dictionary open to Ardent, which is either dangerously forward or barely appropriate, depending on whether your intended's father is a clergyman or a retired colonel. Writing a Victorian love letter is the opposite of firing off a text. There's no instant feedback, no helpful typing bubble, and certainly no undo button. You begin your letter with the utmost care. My dearest Miss Ashcroft. You pause, pen hovering mid-air. Is dearest too much? Should it be Dear Miss Ashcroft, or, God forbid, just Miss Ashcroft? Panic sets in. You contemplate burning the entire house down and starting a new life as a shepherd. You soldier on. Every phrase is a minefield. Express your admiration too plainly, and you risk her mother intercepting the letter and scheduling your wedding before lunch. Too reserved, and your beloved will assume you're secretly writing to her cousin instead. There's an art to hinting at your affection without actually naming it. Your recent performance at the pianoforte was memorable. Should you add most? Is memorable a coded insult? Somewhere. A Victorian etiquette guide shudders. You try for poetry. A dangerous game. Victorians are all about flowery prose, but overshoot, and you risk being quoted as a cautionary tale. Your eyes are twin lanterns, guiding me through life's uncertain fog. Not bad, but is lantern too industrial? You consider candles, but worry it might imply you think her forehead is waxy. Back to the drawing board. Then comes the signature, easily the most perilous part. Yours affectionately, too forward. Yours sincerely, too cold. Yours until the Thames runs dry, legally binding in 3 counties. Most people compromise with, I remain, ever your devoted servant, which sounds like you're about to bring her slippers. You settle on, with the utmost regard, hoping it conveys exactly 0% desperation. You fold the letter and slip it into an envelope, which must then be sealed with wax, preferably your family crest, but honestly, anything not involving a cat will do. Then, the delivery. There's no send button, just a lot of waiting. The local footman or postboy carries your hopes, fears, and grammatical errors across town. Hopefully not stopping for tea or accidentally dropping your confession in a puddle. Now, the agony of anticipation. Days pass, maybe weeks if there's a flood, a war, or the postman's gout flares up. In this time, you're expected to continue functioning, eating toast, making polite conversation, pretending not to have written 5 different versions of the same letter to your own reflection. When a reply finally arrives, it's a masterpiece of subtext. Victorians never say what they mean. They suggest, hint, and occasionally include a pressed flower if things are serious. You scrutinize every phrase. Does "I was pleased to receive your correspondence" mean actual pleasure, or just not total disgust? Of course, there's always the risk of interception. Mothers, nosy siblings, and housemaids with a taste for drama routinely steam open letters or read them aloud to anyone in earshot. Your declaration of undying devotion may become breakfast entertainment. And so it goes. Weeks, months, possibly years of letter writing, each one a carefully worded exercise in longing and restraint. Modern romance has nothing on this level of emotional cardio. By the end, if you manage to secure a courtship or just avoid exile, you'll never complain about left on read ever again. Welcome to the Parlor Olympics, where flirting is performed via hand fans, eyebrow twitches, and an elaborate choreography involving settees and antimacassars. Say too much, you're scandalous. Say too little, you're invisible. Good luck threading that needle. The Victorian Parlor, a room designed exclusively for people to sit, judge, and quietly burn with suppressed romantic longing. The rules of engagement are clear, never straightforward. The moment you enter, You are surrounded by doilies, overstuffed chairs, and a veritable minefield of conversation traps. If the wallpaper doesn't get you, the social protocols will. Your weapon of choice? The fan. Not for cooling, don't be absurd, but for communication. Flick it open quickly, and you're excited. Hide behind it, and you're coy. Drop it, and you might as well propose marriage then and there. If you're lucky, you'll remember not to flutter it too fast, or people will assume you have either inappropriate intentions or a respiratory disease. Subtlety is key, so is upper body strength. These fans are made of mahogany and gilt. If you're a man, your toolkit is slightly different. You must master the fine art of leaning, never too close, never too distant. The armchair is your battleground. One arm draped along the back says, "I'm open to conversation." Both arms rigidly at your sides means, "I am so repressed that my hat is considering eloping without me." Crossing your legs? A power move. Crossing your eyes? Social suicide. It's all about angles, posture, and a facial expression that says, "I have never had a single inappropriate thought in my life, and I'm not having one right now." Conversation, meanwhile, is a delicate fencing match. A discussion about the weather can turn flirtatious with a single, well-placed sigh. A debate about the merits of antimacassars, those decorative cloths on the furniture, could, if you're not careful, become a metaphor for your relationship. Attractive, but mostly for show, and likely to end up with someone's aunt sitting on it for 2 hours. Every social gathering comes with its own set of obstacles. The settee, for instance, is both opportunity and threat. If you manage to share it with your beloved, there must be at least 6 inches, and preferably a small dog or prayer book, between you. Anything less, and the room's older inhabitants will begin mentally measuring you for wedding outfits. Anything more, and your intended will wonder if you have secretly become a Methodist. Eyebrow twitches and glances are your only safe currency. You develop the ability to express entire operas with a single raised brow. A sideways look can mean "I adore you," "I'm about to sneeze," or "please rescue me from this conversation about turnip yields." The meaning, of course, is understood only by the person you hope will understand it, and completely misinterpreted by everyone else. Background music is provided by a relative playing the pianoforte, always slightly off-key. This is your chance to shine, offering compliments that are neither too effusive, "What masterful use of the black keys," nor too honest, "Well, you certainly played all the notes." Each round of applause is as much for your diplomatic skills as it is for the music. The real fun, of course, is in the small rebellions, sharing a cushion, brushing fingers while passing the sugar bowl, risking a smile when someone tells a joke that is, by Victorian standards, almost risque. These tiny acts of rebellion are both terrifying and thrilling. A whole romance played out between the antimacassars and the ticking of the grandfather clock. By the end of the evening, you have exchanged no more than 8 actual words and enough coded signals to fill a telegraph office. You leave the parlor exhausted, heart pounding, and desperately hoping you didn't drop your fan at the wrong moment. Victorian flirting, a game of inches, glances, and the ever-present risk of sitting on the cat. Tea time is where reputations are made and destroyed. Every biscuit dipped is a political act. Gossip flows faster than the tea, and the tiniest misstep, a dropped spoon, an awkward giggle, can ruin your chances at love for the next 3 seasons. You think you're just coming for a light snack and a cozy chat, but in reality, you've entered the Colosseum of Victorian romance. Afternoon tea is not just a meal, it's a gladiatorial event where the weapons are sugar tongs and the gladiators wear petticoats. You arrive with your hands washed, your best manners at the ready, and a quiet terror that you'll sneeze and spray crumbs across Mrs. Weatherby's hat. There's a seating chart. There are rules about napkins. There are rules about the rules. The first hurdle is seating. Too close to your crush, and everyone assumes you're seconds from an elopement. Too far away, and you might as well start writing your own spinster memoirs. You take your assigned spot and pray you aren't sandwiched between the cousin who snorts while laughing and the uncle who uses the butter knife as a pointer for discussing the situation in the Crimea. Your host eyes the table like a chess master, positioning potential matches and steering feuding aunts far apart. Your role is to sit, sip, and survive. Pouring tea is an art form and an audition. The angle of your wrist, the steadiness of your hand, the way you pour for others before yourself, all scrutinized for hidden meaning. If you pour milk first, congratulations, you've just signaled a revolutionary spirit, or perhaps just northern roots, but you're also risking social annihilation. Heaven help you if you stir too loudly. A clinking spoon is the mating call of the uncouth. The scone arrives, warm, fragrant, and served with a mountain of clotted cream and jam. But how you construct it is a matter of life and death. Jam first, cream first. There are regional loyalties at stake and family honor on the line. You do your best and hope your technique doesn't start a decades-long feud. Gossip is the true centerpiece. It's passed around with the same delicacy as the sugar bowl, but with twice the edge. Who's courting whom? Who was seen walking too briskly by the river? Was that a new hat? Or just an old one decorated with hope? One eyebrow raised at the wrong moment, and your romantic life is toast, served cold and unbuttered. You listen with polite interest, careful never to look too eager or too bored. If someone mentions you, it's time for the most dangerous game, deflection. Counter with a bland compliment, change the subject to the weather, and absolutely do not spill your tea. Meanwhile, romantic signals are everywhere but must be camouflaged beneath 100 layers of social etiquette. Did your suitor select the same pastry as you? Is that a coded message? Did someone brush your sleeve as they reached for the sugar? Entire relationships begin and end over a plate of cucumber sandwiches and a few meaningful crumbs. There's always at least one small disaster. Maybe it's you, dropping a currant bun straight into your lap, or perhaps it's your rival, accidentally launching a sugar cube across the table with a nervous sneeze. The room freezes, time stops, and everyone waits to see how you'll handle it. If you recover with grace and a self-deprecating smile, you might survive to be invited again. If not, prepare for a 3-week exile from polite company and a starring role in several local anecdotes. As the teapot's empty and the gossip cools, you rise from the table grateful to have escaped unscathed. Your fate, however, is now out of your hands and firmly in the realm of rumour. One awkward laugh could cost you a season's worth of invitations or deliver the most promising glances from the right set of eyes. In the Victorian age, love is always one sip away from scandal, and every scone is a social risk wrapped in jam. So next time you dunk a biscuit in your tea, remember, somewhere in history, an entire romance lived and died in the time it takes for a crumpet to get soggy. Interested in someone? Time to send a calling card. It's like texting, but with more risk of paper cuts and a terrifying chance your intentions will be misinterpreted as a business proposal. The butler judges you either way. It all begins with a rectangle of heavy cardstock, thicker than your morning toast and almost as dry as the conversation you're about to have with your intended's parents. In Victorian England, love doesn't knock on the door. It slides discreetly onto a silver tray and waits to be evaluated by a small army of gatekeepers. Your handwriting must be flawless, your ink the right shade of black, and your initials elaborately entwined enough to prove you have both breeding and spare time. The stakes are high. This is not just a card. It's your entire romantic resume condensed into a few square inches. Too ornate, and you look desperate or possibly French. Too plain, and you risk being mistaken for the chimney sweep's apprentice. Some people try embossed lettering, others a tasteful border. If you're really out to impress, maybe a tiny crest or a wax seal, but be careful. Go too fancy, and you'll spark rumors you're actually titled, or worse, nouveau rich. Now comes the actual delivery. Unlike sending a text, where a reply might come in minutes or leave you on read for eternity, the calling card requires a middleman, the butler. He is the final boss of the Victorian dating world. His face is a mask of polite indifference as he accepts your card, but his eyes are busy noting your shoes, your posture, and whether your family is the kind that pays its debts or the kind that still owes for last year's marmalade. If you pass the first trial, your card is placed delicately on a tray among the day's other hopefuls, business rivals, ambitious social climbers, and that one person who still thinks handwritten poetry is a good way to introduce themselves. The lady of the house will review these offerings with the gravity of a Supreme Court judge. Does she recognize your name? Do you have enough vowels in it to be respectable? Have you spelled compliments correctly? Or will this be another social tragedy for her to discuss over tea? Meanwhile, you wait. There is no tracking number. There are no status updates. There is only the crushing anticipation as you wonder if your card will be displayed on the mantelpiece, the ultimate endorsement, or quietly misplaced under a pile of unpaid bills and last year's Christmas greetings. If your card is accepted, you may receive an invitation, perhaps to call at a set hour, perhaps to join a small gathering. The invitation is just as coded as the original card. Thursday at 4 means you might get 5 minutes and a slice of dry cake if the butler hasn't eaten it first. Regretfully engaged means you've been ghosted, Victorian style, and should probably take up hobbies involving solitude and cats. Should you actually make it to the parlor, you're still not in the clear. Your card is now part of the household's running tally of who's who. It may be placed beside others, judged on its weight and taste, and even shown to other guests as a conversation piece or a warning. Your crush might glance at your card, then at you, then back at your card, as if to check that you match the font. It's a lot of pressure for stationery. All this risk and ritual just to say, "Hey, I think you're neat." But in a world without DMs, emojis, or even a decent phone call, a calling card is a lifeline. It's a tiny, fragile step toward love, a moment of hope placed delicately in the hands of someone else's butler. By the end of the ordeal, you've either made it one step closer to romance or become the subject of several whispered asides in the drawing room. Either way, you'll never look at a business card the same way again. In the Victorian age, swiping right was as easy as it was nerve-wracking, and every budding romance began with the same question: is your handwriting good enough to fall in love with? Romance is a team sport, and the chaperone is always on defense. Whether it's your aunt, a sour-faced governess, or the family dog trained to bark at hand-holding, you'll never be alone. Love is patient, and apparently, so is Mrs. Peabody. No matter how determined your romantic intentions, there is always someone lurking just out of frame, knitting, glaring, or pretending to do a crossword puzzle with one eye fixed on your every move. In the Victorian world, a true courtship can only be conducted under the unblinking gaze of someone old enough to remember when trousers were scandalous and ankles were strictly theoretical. Picture it. You and your intended finally seated together on the settee, close enough to feel the static electricity from starched collars and petticoats. Across from you, Mrs. Peabody perches, a vision in bombazine and suspicion, the human embodiment of the phrase "not on my watch." She claims to be reading the Psalms, but you suspect her spectacles are just for show. Every time you clear your throat or risk a sidelong glance, she adjusts in her seat, a subtle Morse code that means, don't even think about it. The chaperone's powers are considerable. She can change the topic of conversation with a single sniff. She can ruin a moment of meaningful silence just by coughing. Her arsenal includes the heavy sigh, the sharp ahem, and the legendary teacup rattle, a maneuver so precise it's rumoured to have ended 3 engagements in 1847 alone. Her presence hovers like the faint smell of mothballs, settling over every word and gesture. Sometimes, chaperonage is outsourced to professionals. The governess, armed with knitting needles and an endless supply of cautionary tales about young people who got ideas. Sometimes it's the family dog, a loyal, if slightly confused companion trained to detect and bark at any sign of romance. The result is the same. Wherever you go, whatever you do, someone is there to supervise, intervene, and, if necessary, fetch smelling salts. The rules are clear. If you wish to walk in the garden, the chaperone walks with you, falling behind just enough to overhear everything but not so far as to miss a discreet exchange of daffodils. If you play parlor games, she ensures all physical contact is limited to the accidental brushing of fingertips while picking up a stray game piece. And if, heaven forbid, you find yourselves alone for even a moment, perhaps you've both wandered into the conservatory to admire a particularly suggestive fern, she appears as if summoned by the Victorian spirits of propriety. You suspect she has a secret passageway. What makes chaperones truly impressive is their endurance. You may grow tired of endless small talk and pining sighs, but Mrs. Peabody never wilts. She sits through every afternoon tea, every aimless stroll, every half hour of pointedly polite conversation about the weather. She has watched generations of hopeful couples and shows no sign of relenting. If romance is a marathon, she's the stone pillar at mile 20, unmoved and unimpressed. Chaperones see themselves as the last bastion of civilization, a line of defense against scandal, fainting, or worst of all, hasty proposals. They have read every etiquette manual, remember every family disgrace, and can sniff out improper intentions from 50 paces. Their mission is to protect your reputation, which, in Victorian England, is far more delicate than any heart. By the end of the evening, you and your beloved have exchanged exactly 6 words, 3 glances, and 1 risky smile. Mrs. Peabody gathers her shawl with an air of triumph, certain she has personally preserved the dignity of the entire family tree. You, meanwhile, trudge off to bed, slightly resentful and deeply grateful you weren't born as a Jane Austen protagonist. In the great game of Victorian romance, love may conquer all, but chaperones win most of the skirmishes. And as you drift to sleep, you wonder if tomorrow you'll finally manage to hold hands in the garden, or if Mrs. Peabody will simply adopt a pair of binoculars. If you want to woo someone, you'll have to navigate the social minefield of the ball. The dance card is both invitation and obstacle course. Too many empty slots, you're desperate. Too many suitors, you're a flirt. All you wanted was a waltz without a career-ending scandal. It all starts at the entrance, where you're handed a tiny booklet attached to a ribbon, your dance card for the evening. It looks innocent enough, but this small rectangle holds your entire romantic reputation in its filigree-trimmed pages. If the penmanship is shaky, everyone assumes you're nervous. If the ink smudges, it's a sign you're hiding something, or worse, left-handed. At the top, you write your name in your best copperplate, praying you don't accidentally spell it the French way and spark rumours of foreign intrigue. The ballroom is ablaze with candlelight and chandeliers, every surface glinting, every corner filled with whispers. The scent of wax, perfume, and social ambition clings to the air. Around you, hopeful mothers circle like hawks in lace, evaluating prospects with laser focus. The orchestra tunes up, and your heart pounds in 4/4 time. Dances are carefully choreographed rituals of longing and logistics. Each one must be claimed in advance and recorded on your card. A single misstep, and your schedule collapses into chaos. The waltz is prime real estate. Get asked too late, and you're doomed to sit with the dowagers, nursing lukewarm lemonade and your wounded pride. The quadrille is for friends, the polka for risk-takers, and the cotillion for people who enjoy synchronized confusion. God help you if someone tries to pencil in a second dance. Double booking is a declaration of war. As the music starts, the negotiations begin. Would-be suitors approach with a subtle bow and the world's most terrifyingly polite question, "May I have the pleasure?" Accept too quickly and you're eager. Hesitate and you risk a scene. There's a pecking order. Family, friends, eligible bachelors, and that one person your mother keeps hinting about, whose only redeeming quality is his inheritance of a moderately successful turnip farm. Every dance is a coded conversation. During a stately minuet, you talk about the weather, never feelings. In a fast-paced gallop, you try not to make eye contact in case someone thinks you're proposing. Hands barely touch, eyes flick away, and yet every gesture is charged with potential. If you step on your partner's toes, it's not just an apology, it's a minor social crisis. The true drama unfolds at the refreshment table. Here, people read and reread dance cards, looking for hidden messages. Empty spaces? Scandalous? Overfilled? Suspicious? The rumors fly faster than the punch bowl can be refilled. Is Miss Cartwright really dancing twice with Mr. Montague? Did someone pencil themselves in and then erase it? Were there initials, or was that a smudge? Someone will write a sonnet about it by morning. Occasionally, disaster strikes. Maybe you drop your card, and it's picked up by the wrong person. Maybe you accidentally double book and find yourself the unwilling star of a waltz-off between two third cousins. Perhaps, in a moment of courage, you scribble your own name into your beloved's empty slot, only to realize you've done it in ink that bleeds through the paper. These are the memories that keep you up at night, or at least fuel gossip until the next social season. By midnight, your feet ache, your hair is wilting, and your dance card looks like a battlefield. You've survived missteps, small talk, and at least one near-fatal flirtation over the lavender lemonade. If you're lucky, you secured that all-important waltz and exchanged a few words with someone who makes your heart skip a beat. If not, at least you've avoided becoming the subject of a new cautionary tale about the dangers of improper scheduling. In the grand romance of Victorian society, love might be patient, but it also has very sore toes. And as the orchestra plays the last chord, you realize that sometimes just making it through the evening with your dignity, mostly intact, is its own kind of victory. Nothing says let's fall in love like watching a soprano die of consumption while your intended weeps discreetly into a lace handkerchief. Bonus points if you understand what's happening on stage. Double bonus if you can pretend you're not bored out of your mind. Opera night is the social event of the Victorian season. It's where love is declared, mostly through strategic glances, passive-aggressive coughs, and the sharing of an opera glass. The opera house itself is a monument to excess. Gilded balconies, crimson velvet curtains, and enough candlelight to single-handedly threaten the national bee population. You arrive in your finest, feathers trembling, cravats starched to architectural rigidity. Knowing your seat placement says as much about your family's status as your actual surname. Finding your box is an exercise in both geography and social climbing. You parade down the aisles, guided by an usher whose only qualification is being immune to bribes. If you're lucky, your box is close enough to see the stage, but not so close that you're hit by stray bits of scenery or flying tenors in the case of comic opera. The best boxes, of course, are in prime viewing range of everyone else's opera glasses, the 19th century version of trending on social media. The lights dim, the overture begins, and suddenly you are swept into a 3-hour saga of love, betrayal, and at least one very confusing subplot involving mistaken identity and a dramatic hat. If you're truly courting someone, you'll spend the next several hours pretending to care deeply about the music, all while silently timing your own heartbeat to the pace of the conductor's baton. Every whispered commentary between acts is a test. Did you notice the aria? Can you pronounce mezzo? Soprano without coughing? Have you, at any point, mistaken Verdi for Wagner? Careful, this is a capital offense among music enthusiasts. Meanwhile, the real show is in the audience. Your intended sits nearby, dabbing at the corner of their eye with lace and practiced decorum. You try to pass them the opera glass at just the right moment, a gesture loaded with subtext. Is it friendship? Is it flirtation? Or is it simply a way to avoid squinting at yet another tragic duet? It's impossible to say, but the stakes are high. The wrong timing, and you'll spend intermission explaining to Aunt Euphemia why you're encouraging continental tendencies. Between acts, everyone retires to the promenade to see and be seen. Here, Romance flourishes or withers under the harsh glow of gas lamps and the sharper edge of gossip. You might catch a private word with your beloved while pretending to critique the tenor's high notes. Brave, but perhaps a touch ambitious. Or you might be cornered by someone's father, who wishes to discuss the economics of the plot as a thinly veiled metaphor for your dowry. Back in your seat, the second act resumes. Now the soprano is dying with style. The baritone is confessing his undying love, and you're wondering if anyone would notice if you quietly ate the emergency biscuit you smuggled in your glove. Your intended squeezes your hand, by accident, of course, and for a moment, you're the hero and heroine of your own opera, minus the tuberculosis. By curtain call, you've survived Wagner's wall of sound, the awkwardly long bows, and at least 2 whispered threats from a chaperone. You applaud, you bow, and you exit into the chilly night, heart fluttering like a stray sheet of music. Maybe your beloved drops their handkerchief for you to retrieve, or maybe you just share a silent glance that says, "At least we made it to the end." In the Victorian world, love at the opera is equal parts endurance, sport, and emotional high-wire act. Whether you actually liked the show is irrelevant. What matters is that you were seen, you were proper, and you managed to stay awake. That's the real triumph, especially if you left humming the overture and not your own funeral march. With all this surveillance, lovers become spies. Handkerchiefs, bouquets, and the way you stir your tea, all are used to send clandestine signals. The only thing riskier than being caught is being misunderstood and accidentally insulting someone's mother. In the Victorian world, true love requires nerves of steel, steady hands, and a working knowledge of the secret language of everything. Every surface is booby-trapped with the potential for scandal. Forget secret texts and burner phones. Your options are a pressed violet, a hastily folded note, or an urgent message spelled out in the crumbs of a shortbread biscuit. Welcome to the clandestine circus. You start with flowers. Bouquets are basically the Victorian equivalent of a fully encrypted messaging app. Red roses for true love, yellow for friendship, white lilies for innocence, and, if you're not careful, chrysanthemums for deeply sorry, but I am in love with your second cousin. There are entire books dedicated to decoding floral intentions, because nothing says I adore you like handing someone a potted fern and waiting to see if they faint, swoon, or call for a chaperone. Then there's the fan. As previously discussed, this is less about personal comfort and more about international diplomacy. A fan snapped shut in a certain way can mean "follow me to the terrace." Opened and fluttered 3 times, "I'm being watched, don't even look at me." Dropped, it's practically a marriage proposal, so handle with care. Handkerchiefs too have their own vocabulary. Dropped on purpose. "I'm interested." Dropped by accident. "I'm nervous and possibly about to faint." Waved at the wrong moment? You've just declared your undying devotion to the wrong sibling. Eye contact is another weapon in your covert arsenal. 3 glances in quick succession equals "meet me after dinner." No glances at all means "run." The vicar is watching. It's a miracle anyone managed to marry the right person, or indeed, anyone at all. Sometimes a whole relationship unfolds in the space of a single dinner party, across the soup course, beneath the suspicious gaze of Mrs. Peabody, and under threat of an accidental proposal by Soup Spoon. But nothing beats the thrill of the coded note. You carefully pen your message in the world's tiniest handwriting. Fold it smaller than the family silver, and entrust it to a sympathetic younger sibling, a semi-trained spaniel, or the household cat, reliable only half the time. The note must be hidden in a book of poetry, slipped under a cushion, or concealed in a basket of scones. Delivering it is a test of skill and nerve. One wrong move, and it will be intercepted, read aloud, and discussed at length in the next local news bulletin, also known as tea with the neighbours. Even the way you stir your tea is a performance. Clockwise with a certain intensity might mean "I long for you." Anti-clockwise, the chaperone is suspicious. If you tap the cup twice, you're asking, "Shall we elope?" or at least swap scone recipes. Of course, this is all open to misinterpretation, which is why so many Victorian couples accidentally got engaged to the wrong person, or found themselves at dawn, dueling over the last macaroon. Of course, all this secrecy creates an atmosphere of constant, delicious tension. You and your beloved exchange significant looks over the teacups, pass cryptic notes disguised as invitations to croquet, and occasionally send bouquets so overloaded with subtext that the meaning is anyone's guess. The goal is to be understood by exactly one person and ignored by everyone else. An art form never fully perfected, but always attempted with flair. By the end of the evening, you're exhausted. Not from conversation, but from mental gymnastics. Did your message get through? Did that handkerchief actually say "meet me at midnight"? Or did it suggest you're ready for a change in wallpaper? In a world where every gesture counts and every glance is a risk, love is a puzzle box and every day a new riddle. Congratulations! You've survived another day in the world's most elaborate escape room. Victorian romance. Come for the longing, stay for the covert ops. True love in Victorian times is less about sparks and more about references. You'll need approval from your parents, their parents, 3 uncles, and a neighbor who once saw you trip on a cobblestone. If your family says yes, congratulations, your adventure is just beginning. The moment you dare to catch feelings, you're swept into the grand Victorian tradition of turning romance into a full-scale group project. Gone are the days of simple courtship. Here, every proposal is audited, every glance peer-reviewed, and your relationship is subject to the approval process of what can only be described as the world's most opinionated board meeting. Your parents take the lead, naturally. Your mother reviews your intended's family tree as if she's compiling evidence for a criminal trial. Has their family ever been embroiled in scandal? Did someone's great-uncle run off to Canada? Is there a history of gout, bankruptcy, or questionable hat choices? Each fact is carefully weighed, discussed, and, if necessary, gossiped about over breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Your father, meanwhile, has his own priorities. Land, livestock, and whether your suitor's handshake feels firm enough to guarantee a respectable dowry. He'll quiz your beloved on topics ranging from politics, Gladstone or Disraeli, to the price of wheat, and if they survive, they'll have passed the first of many invisible tests. Fail to answer, and you're politely redirected toward a cousin with more prospects and fewer radical ideas. But the parental gauntlet is just the beginning. Enter the extended family. Uncles with strong opinions and even stronger mustaches, aunts who remember every slight from 1836, and a parade of cousins who offer their services as amateur private investigators. Everyone gets a say. Some families even keep a ledger of courtship attempts, who visited, what they wore, and how many times they laughed too loudly during grace. Next up, references. These aren't just formalities. The vicar is asked if he's ever seen your beloved steel biscuits from the church picnic. The housekeeper is consulted on the state of their cuffs and collars. That one neighbour, who still remembers the great incident of the fallen parasol, chimes in with her own verdict, delivered in a whisper that somehow echoes for miles. Even the local grocer's opinion counts, especially if your suitor has ever haggled too hard over apples. Should you miraculously pass this round, there's still the interview phase. Your beloved is invited for tea, placed at the centre of the table, like a particularly nervous centerpiece, and quizzed on everything from preferred hymns to political leanings. All responses are noted, analysed, and discussed after dinner, usually with pie charts and at least one heated debate about the significance of a poorly timed sneeze. Of course, all this scrutiny means that even if your love is true and your references are glowing, nothing is guaranteed. A single awkward moment, a mismatched glove, an ill-judged joke, a sneeze that accidentally splatters jam, could doom your prospects for years. People have been exiled for less. And if your intended does pass muster, everyone will take full credit. I always said he had a nice brow, your aunt remarks, conveniently forgetting she once described him as one sandwich short of a picnic. The final verdict is delivered in a family summit that's part wedding rehearsal, part inquisition. You hold your breath as your fate is decided, often with a single nod, a murmur of quite satisfactory, or, for the truly lucky, a rare smile. Only then are you allowed to proceed to the next stage of romance. Supervised courtship, formal declarations, and even more tea. And so, in the world of Victorian love, romance is never just a private affair. It's a relay race, a talent show, and a jury trial all rolled into one. Survive it, and you'll have earned your happy ending, not just with your beloved, but with the full and noisy blessing of an entire committee. Nothing brings two people together like the terror of hearing your own words of longing read aloud by a parent who thinks the prose could be snappier. Next time, consider just sending a fruit basket. Victorian romance has many challenges. Corsets, chaperones, the constant threat of being judged by a butler, but nothing quite compares to the horror of watching your most private feelings become communal property by the fireside. It begins with good intentions, a hastily composed letter, all swirling ink and trembling declarations, slipped discreetly into an envelope and left where it can never possibly be discovered, which is precisely where it is guaranteed to be found. The culprit could be anyone, a curious younger sibling, a particularly meddlesome housemaid, or a dog with an unfortunate taste for stationery. No secret is safe in a Victorian home where privacy is an abstract concept, and the phrase personal boundaries might as well be written in Sanskrit. The result is inevitable. Your missive is retrieved and brought straight to the fireside, where family members are always conveniently gathered, and where embarrassment waits to pounce. What follows is a unique kind of public shaming, wrapped in warmth and the scent of burning peat. The letter is produced with a flourish, sometimes by a sibling eager for revenge, sometimes by a mother pretending not to notice the wax seal has been pried open with a hairpin. There is a moment, a heartbeat of hope, when you consider denying authorship, but then someone recognizes your tendency to overuse the word yearning and the game is up. Reading love letters aloud is a beloved fireside tradition, right up there with ghost stories and competitive knitting. Each phrase is carefully enunciated, every flourish of your pen given the full dramatic treatment. What was meant to be a private declaration becomes a group activity, complete with commentary. Your father may critique your metaphors. Bit much, don't you think? While your sister winces at the phrase eternal devotion, and your grandmother reminisces about the days when men compared women to butter churns, not moonbeams. The only thing worse than the reading itself is the analysis that follows. Every family member weighs in, offering unsolicited feedback. Your attempts at poetry are dissected, your handwriting critiqued, and your choice of stationery reviewed as if it were a rare fossil. Did you really need 3 pages on her eyelashes? Someone will ask. It's a first draft, you mumble, already vowing never to pick up a pen again. But even as you suffer, there's a strange camaraderie to it all. Family members begin recounting their own youthful embarrassments. The misaddressed valentine, the disastrous serenade, the time Uncle Charles accidentally mailed his marriage proposal to the wrong cousin. The laughter is at your expense, but it's also oddly reassuring, a reminder that everyone, at some point, has been mortified by love. And somewhere in the midst of the teasing, there's genuine affection. Your mother may roll her eyes at your aching heart, but she saves the letter as a keepsake. Your father, gruff as ever, might admit that he too once wrote a few silly lines. Even your siblings, merciless in their teasing, defend you if anyone outside the family dares to mock. By the time the fire burns low, your cheeks are red, but your spirit is only a little bruised. The letter, now dog-eared and coffee-stained, is returned to you, sometimes with suggested edits, sometimes with a gentle squeeze of the hand. You survive. You even find yourself smiling, grateful for the odd blend of humiliation and support that only family can provide. In the end, Victorian romance is rarely private. But if you can survive a fireside reading, you can survive anything, including perhaps the next love letter you dare to send. Or, failing that, you can always try fruit baskets, less poetic, but much harder to recite out loud. Love meets commerce at the marriage market, where you're valued by your dowry, your ability to play the pianoforte, and whether or not your father is likely to be sued. It's not so much matchmaking as competitive shopping, and everyone is losing. You'd like to believe that love conquers all, but in the Victorian era, love is mostly left waiting in the cloakroom while business is discussed in the ballroom. The marriage market is not an actual market, no stalls, no haggling over cucumbers, but it's every bit as transactional. Young ladies are paraded out at society events like slightly nervous livestock, their debut announced in the local papers, their virtues itemized for easy reference. Accomplished in French, embroidery, and the fine art of pretending to enjoy poetry, the announcements might as well read, with modest assets and promising childbearing hips. Dowries are the currency of the realm, and the negotiations begin well before any love letters are exchanged. Families draw up lists, comparing property, inheritance, and the possibility of that one elderly uncle finally kicking the bucket. A father with a decent bank account is more attractive than any poet with soulful eyes. And the real magic words aren't "I love you," but settlements in perpetuity. If your dowry is meager, you're encouraged to excel at watercolors, or at least appear enthusiastic about the church fete. Debuts are high-pressure spectacles, part beauty pageant, part cattle auction, part social obstacle course. You're introduced to society at the grandest ball your parents can afford, in a dress so tight you wonder if breathing is just for peasants. There's a code to all this: who bows first, who extends the dance invitation, who is caught sneaking an extra lemon tart when the Dowager Countess isn't looking. You must be demure, graceful, and always agreeable, even when your shoes are pinching and your hair is being devoured by a rogue feather. The eligible gentlemen are on parade as well, mostly ranking each other by the size of their future estate and the number of vowels in their surname. Rumours swirl. He's a baronet, but his mother's cousin went mad. He's an officer, but hopeless at whist. Every glance is assessed, every whispered remark catalogued by the unofficial League of Society aunts, who treat matchmaking like Olympic sport. Once you enter the circuit, the clock starts ticking. Society expects matches to be made swiftly, before your complexion fades or your father's investments collapse. You attend teas, garden parties, endless rounds of accidental encounters at the park. Your mother gently reminds you, for the third time that morning, that ladies with large fortunes rarely linger on the shelf. Your father consults the racing form and mutters about eligible bachelors as if picking the next Derby winner. Meanwhile, actual love is a risky business. You might fall for someone charming but penniless, or find yourself the subject of a bidding war between two suitors with equally alarming sideburns. Proposals are often timed with military precision, preferably before the end of the season, and certainly before Lady Wilberforce's annual scandalous picnic, which has a habit of derailing the best-laid plans. Occasionally, a match is made for love, and everyone pretends to be shocked before immediately calculating the potential drawbacks. Will the families blend? Will the estates? Can Aunt Mildred be trusted near the punch bowl at the wedding? The logistics of merging two dynasties are only slightly less complex than organizing a naval campaign. By the end of the season, you're exhausted, measured, appraised, and still not entirely sure what constitutes a good match. You're grateful for the rare, quiet moments when you can actually talk to your intended about something other than settlements and luncheon menus. Victorian marriage is a peculiar alchemy of hope, strategy, and social climbing. If you manage to find genuine affection amid the dowries, deadlines, and debutante madness, congratulations, you've pulled off the rarest feat of all. In a world where love is priced per acre and happiness is best expressed in a marriage contract, every success is a tiny revolution, quiet, stubborn, and just a little bit romantic. Sometimes love can't wait. That's when you elope, risking shame, social exile, and the possibility of being chased down by 3 aunts and a horse-drawn carriage. It's romantic, if you don't mind never seeing your belongings again. Victorian elopement, equal parts passion and peril, with a generous side of logistical chaos. Forget spontaneous Vegas weddings and let's just do it text messages. In this era, running away to marry meant braving muddy country roads, bribing sleepy coachmen, and spending the next decade avoiding eye contact with your relatives at every village fair. Love is patient, but elopement is what happens when patience finally snaps like a cheap garter. It always starts with a whisper, a forbidden glance exchanged across the ballroom, a heated conversation behind a well-placed fern. There are secret plans, desperate notes written by candlelight, and breathless rendezvous by the garden gate. Each step is fraught with peril, because nothing draws the attention of Victorian society faster than 2 young people attempting to mind their own business. The minute you hint at running off, everyone becomes a detective, chaperones, neighbours, and especially those aunts who treat family honour like a full-time job. When the moment comes, you move fast. There are bags to be packed, badly, coins to be counted, and nerves to be steeled. You slip out in the dead of night, tripping over your own valise and hoping the family dog doesn't sound the alarm. If you're lucky, the local coachman is both discreet and short-sighted. If you're not, word will reach your parents before you've left the garden wall. Victorian parents have the uncanny ability to sense scandal from 5 miles away and are always prepared to mobilize a rescue party at a moment's notice. The journey itself is a trial. Stagecoaches were not designed for comfort or romance. You bounce along muddy roads, hair unraveling, clothes acquiring new wrinkles, and possibly a small woodland creature or 2. Rain leaks in, wheels get stuck, and at least one essential item, a hat, a shoe, a cherished locket, will be lost along the way. There's a brief, giddy thrill to the freedom, but mostly it's cold, hungry, and distinctly unglamorous. You clutch your partner's hand and remind yourself that love, surely, is worth every splinter in this seat. You might head for Gretna Green, the ultimate destination for star-crossed lovers, just over the Scottish border, where blacksmiths performed quick, legally binding marriages for a modest fee and a generous tip. The anvil rings, the witnesses nod, and suddenly you're wed. No parents, no permission, and ideally no pursuers visible on the horizon. It's romantic in theory, and in practice, surprisingly loud. Back home, the news spreads like wildfire. Aunt Henrietta faints. Uncle George swears revenge. The family solicitor sharpens his pen and begins composing very serious letters. For days, the talk is of nothing else. There are urgent council meetings in drawing rooms, frantic correspondence, and of course, the obligatory journey northward by anyone with a claim to family dignity. Victorian society treats every elopement like a national emergency, with extra scones at tea to soothe the nerves. The consequences are lasting. Elopers face social exile, icy invitations, if any, and years of you know how they met at every gathering. On the plus side, you'll always have a dramatic origin story to share with the grandchildren, if you're ever allowed to see them. But sometimes, just sometimes, it works out. The world doesn't end, and families eventually recover their composure and possibly their missing silverware. The couple, now legends in their own right, might return to society after a suitable period of disgrace, older, wiser, and possibly in possession of a few new sheep. Love survives, as it always seems to, even when the road is bumpy and the relatives unrelenting. So if you ever feel the urge to elope, remember, all you need is courage, a good coachman, and a total disregard for your family's embroidery circle. Romance, Victorian style, isn't just about candlelit proposals. It's about braving mud, scandal, and a lifetime supply of family stories you'll never live down. For every secret love, there's an even juicier scandal. The Victorian world is a minefield of ruined reputations, whispered rumours, and passionate affairs carried out behind the most tasteful drapes in town. Keep your secrets and your windows shut. In an era where even the way you buttered your scone could be dissected for hidden meaning, Victorian romance was never safe from the creeping, crawling spectre of scandal. The code of conduct was strict, the expectations were suffocating, and the local gossip network operated with military efficiency. If you had secrets, you'd better have an iron constitution and some very thick curtains. A flirtatious glance across a crowded ballroom could launch a month's worth of whispers. A letter delivered at an odd hour became the subject of fevered speculation. The stakes were high. One poorly chosen word, one encounter on a foggy lane, and your entire family might find themselves uninvited to next season's garden party, or worse, forced to relocate to somewhere truly bleak, like Bath. Behind closed doors, however, Victorian passion burned as brightly as any gas lamp. Affairs were not just the stuff of penny dreadfuls. They played out in real drawing rooms, behind well-placed potted ferns and screens. Married women exchanged poetry with dashing officers. Gentlemen risked their fortunes and their waistcoats on secret rendezvous at afternoon teas. Servants, who saw and heard everything, held more power than they let on. Nothing got past a housemaid with a grudge and a friend at the grocer's. Of course, not every scandal was about love. Sometimes it was financial, sometimes political, sometimes as simple as a missing pie at a church picnic. But romantic scandals, those were the stories that gave Victorian society its edge. Lovers met in moonlit gardens, risked everything for a moment's embrace, and spent the next several weeks pretending nothing had happened, while the neighbours enthusiastically pretended not to know. Rumours had a half-life longer than uranium. You might spend a lifetime recovering from a single ill-advised comment at a dinner party. Someone claims they saw you strolling in the park, unescorted, no less, with Mr. Ditherspoon. That's it. 3 years of carefully cultivated reputation gone in an afternoon, replaced by a nickname you'll never shake, and at least one poem anonymously published in the local paper. Reputation was everything. Families hired reputation managers, usually a particularly gossipy aunt or two, whose job it was to put out small fires and fan the flames of rival scandals, ideally steering attention away from their own missteps. Apologies were made, hats were doffed, and pies were quietly delivered to the vicarage as peace offerings. Sometimes, if the scandal was big enough, someone was sent abroad for their health, which everyone knew meant until people forget. Occasionally, scandal was embraced. Some wore their notoriety like a feathered hat, becoming the subject of intrigue, admiration, and thinly veiled jealousy. Others retreated into seclusion, leaving their houses shrouded in ivy and mystery. But most people simply carried on, learning the art of denial, the power of strategic feinting, and the value of always keeping the windows shut. There were, of course, legendary tales, runaway heiresses, dukes with secret families, the infamous lemon curd incident of '68. Each story passed from drawing room to drawing room, growing more outlandish with every retelling, until no one could remember if it had ever actually happened at all. And so, in the Victorian age, love was never just between two people. It was a public performance, a family project, and, for the unlucky or overly ambitious, an episode of ongoing damage control. Survival depended on quick thinking, a trustworthy maid, and the ability to deliver a convincing swoon at the drop of a rumour. If you managed to keep your secrets safe, congratulations. If not, at least you'd have a story to tell at tea, and the certain knowledge that somewhere, someone else's scandal was waiting to take your place in the endless, breathless ballet of Victorian society. Unrequited love isn't just a phase, it's practically an occupation. Victorians turned heartbreak into an art form, writing poetry, growing faint, and staring moodily at ponds for hours. Bonus points for dramatically withering away. In the Victorian world, having your heart broken was more than a personal tragedy. It was practically a social requirement. If you'd never suffered a romantic setback, you probably weren't trying hard enough, or at the very least, you weren't reading the right novels. Melancholy was fashionable. To be lovelorn was to be interesting, and to pine openly was a sign of depth. Entire industries sprang up to support the broken-hearted, from silk handkerchief manufacturers to those who sold smelling salts by the basket. It starts with a sigh, a deep, soul-crushing exhale that echoes through the halls and lets everyone know you're going through something. You might stare mournfully at your uneaten toast, or take up wandering in the garden with all the energy of a doomed poet. Your diary becomes a record of woe, its pages swelling with overwritten sonnets and teardrops that, you are convinced, will be studied by future generations. Each poem rhymes pain with rain at least twice. Fainting is encouraged, particularly if you can do it gracefully and land on a well-cushioned chaise. Swooning at the mention of your beloved's name is practically expected. Bonus points if you can also lose interest in soup. A dedicated melancholic might take to their bed for a fortnight, surrounded by worried relatives and an ever-growing pile of gently mocking correspondence. If you're truly committed, you'll develop a mysterious, entirely romantic cough. Of course, heartbreak must be performed in public, as well as private. The parlor is your stage, sighing as you gaze out the window, clutching your latest rejected love letter, or announcing at dinner that you simply cannot eat the roast beef because you have lost your appetite for earthly things. Your family is required to look sympathetic, but by week 2 your siblings are starting a betting pool on how many sonnets you'll write before tea. Friends offer advice, usually unhelpful. There are other fish in the sea, they say, conveniently forgetting that all the best fish are already promised to someone with a larger dowry. Some relatives suggest travel as a cure for heartbreak. Others recommend vigorous exercise, which is code for please stop reciting Byron at breakfast. If you're lucky, heartbreak is a fleeting visitor. If not, it becomes a lifestyle. Some Victorians made careers out of pining, refusing at least 3 perfectly decent matches in favor of eternal longing. There was social status in being inconsolable. Nothing says mysterious and desirable like a habit of wandering the grounds at dawn, clutching a single wilted rose. There were, of course, practical side effects. The family physician might be summoned, recommending a change of air or perhaps a strong tonic, mostly brandy. Friends deliver condolence cards and boxes of chocolates, which you accept with trembling hands and a speech about the futility of joy. Occasionally, a well-meaning aunt will attempt matchmaking, parading distant cousins with the enthusiasm of someone who's just discovered a sale on eligible bachelors. Sometimes, heartbreak leads to artistic greatness. Victorian drawing rooms were filled with aspiring poets and pianists who turned their woes into creative output. The tragedy is recited, performed, and sometimes, if you're lucky, admired from afar by someone new. Other times, heartbreak is simply endured until it becomes part of your personal legend. A tale told at future gatherings whenever someone mentions star-crossed lovers or the mysterious incident at the lake. Eventually, the melancholy lifts, or at least softens around the edges. You find yourself eating soup again, writing fewer poems, and discovering that even the most dramatic heartbreak can be healed by time, distraction, and perhaps a new crush with better prospects. In the Victorian era, a broken heart was as much a performance as a feeling, and if you suffered publicly enough, with enough drama and style, at least you could be sure of one thing: your sorrow would be remembered long after your poetry had mercifully faded from view. Once you're engaged, the real work begins. Endless visits, letters, and public scrutiny. You're now contractually obliged to love each other, or at least to stop flirting with the neighbour's stable boy. Victorian engagement isn't a private celebration. It's an all-consuming group project, with your life's next chapter discussed and dissected by every relative, neighbour, and passing vicar. From the moment the betrothal is announced, typically via a letter, a strategically placed newspaper notice, or, if you're unlucky, a public reading during afternoon tea, your relationship is no longer just yours. Welcome to the world's longest, nosiest group chat. First come the visits. It's not enough for your fiancé to have impressed your parents and Mrs. Peabody, the chaperone. Now they must run the gauntlet of extended relatives, aunts with shrewd questions, uncles who believe character is measured by the firmness of your handshake, and cousins who test your mettle with ambiguous jokes about marital bliss. Every meeting is an interview, every conversation a test. Do you know your Shakespeare? Can you explain the national debt? Can you sit through 3 hours of small talk about gooseberries without visibly aging? Meanwhile, you are expected to write and receive an unending stream of letters. Some are from your intended, filled with declarations of devotion and cautious references to a possible shared future. Most, however, are from well-wishers eager to give advice. Your great-aunt pens 6 pages on the importance of cheerful obedience. Your brother sends a sketch of what he thinks your children might look like. It's not flattering. Your mother checks in daily to remind you about the importance of matching monograms and matching worldviews. Gifts are exchanged, each one symbolically loaded. Flowers, of course, white for purity, red for love, yellow for my mother, still isn't sure about you. There are also books of poetry, carefully inscribed, boxes of chocolates that are secretly inventory for the next heartbreak, and, occasionally, something truly bewildering, like a collection of rare beetles or a stuffed owl. Every present is displayed in the parlor, where it's admired, critiqued, and discussed by the household's resident panel of taste. Public appearances are mandatory. You attend church side by side, making sure to look neither too passionate nor too indifferent. At every gathering, you are introduced as the happy couple, and expected to smile as people take turns recalling their own engagements. Some joyful, some cautionary, all interminable. There's a parade of teas, dinners, and garden strolls, each one an opportunity to prove your compatibility and fortitude. God help you if you're caught arguing about the best way to butter a scone. As an engaged couple, you live in a fishbowl. Every word, every look, every gesture is analyzed by friends, family, and acquaintances who consider themselves relationship experts. Did she look wistful during the hymn? Is his handwriting too florid? Was that a real laugh? Or just an attempt to cover a yawn? Your engagement is a public performance, with a supporting cast that never takes a day off. Of course, not everything is romantic tension and floral arrangements. Engagement is a practical affair. Lists must be drawn up. Where to live, what to buy, who to avoid at family functions. There are legal documents, dowries to finalize, and disputes about everything from the color of the dining room curtains to the future number of children. Consensus, enough to impress, but not enough to bankrupt. You are contractually obligated to make these decisions together, which is a crash course in patience and negotiation. Occasionally, you get a quiet moment together, away from the crowd. It's awkward and sweet, filled with shy hopes and whispered jokes about eloping to Gretna Green. But even here, the spectre of the group chat hovers. Will Aunt Agatha approve? Has someone already written about this in the parish newsletter? By the time the wedding approaches, you're ready for anything. Legal documents, floral crises, or a small rebellion if another advice letter arrives. Survive engagement, and you've already passed the hardest test Victorian romance has to offer. Loving in public, with the world as your witness and your family as the ever-present peanut gallery. Finally, the big day. Weddings are a high-pressure blend of fashion show and endurance sport, complete with tiered cakes that could survive a minor siege, and vows written to sound poetic but legally binding. The morning of your wedding dawns with a level of anxiety rivaled only by the anticipation of tax season or the arrival of an unexpected house guest. If you're the bride, you wake before sunrise to a symphony of bustling maids, last-minute alterations, and your mother's whispered prayers that nobody faints or spills punch on the vicar. Your dress, a confection of white lace, pearls, and hope, requires an entire team just to maneuver down the stairs. For the groom, the ritual is slightly less elaborate but no less harrowing. A last-minute polish of boots, the ceremonial straightening of the world's stiffest collar, and the careful waxing of the all-important moustache. In Victorian society, No groom's face is complete without some kind of elaborate facial statement. Think of it as a promise to cherish, obey, and occasionally frighten small children. The guests begin to arrive, relatives from near and far, each one carrying opinions and, if you're unlucky, the family's long-standing feud. Aunt Mildred insists on wearing the hat that blocks everyone's view, while Uncle Percival refuses to sit near the cake, citing an incident at Cousin Beatrice's wedding that nobody is allowed to mention. There are flowers everywhere, each one chosen for symbolic significance, and because it was on sale at the market that morning, the church itself has never seen so much activity or so many sideways glances. As the ceremony begins, everyone tries their best to look serene. The bride processes down the aisle at the pace of an exhausted glacier, supported by bridesmaids whose main duties are to look adoring and make sure nobody trips over the train. The groom stands at the altar, bravely resisting the urge to fidget. The vicar's sermon is lengthy. The church air is thick with perfume and nerves, and at least one child attempts to eat a buttonhole flower out of sheer boredom. Vows are exchanged. Romantic, yes, but also meticulously vetted by both families' legal advisors. Till death do us part is the easy bit. The fine print covers everything from who gets the tea set to how many pigeons can be released at the end. Answer: no more than 5, and none named after exes. You promise love, fidelity, and to remember everyone's birthday. The rings are presented. Though there's a momentary panic when a best man can't find the right one, he produces 3, none of which actually fit. Then there's the exit, cheers, petals, and the carefully choreographed dash to the carriage, followed by that one relative who insists on singing an off-key rendition of Greensleeves. You are now officially married, though in Victorian England, this is less happily ever after. And more congratulations, you have joined the family accounting department. The real party is just beginning. The wedding breakfast is an endurance event. The cake stands at the center of the table, a towering monstrosity of fruitcake, marzipan, and enough sugar to fuel a medium-sized school for a week. Nobody actually eats the cake, but everyone admires its architectural qualities and wonders how many layers are actually edible. Toasts are made. The best man is humorous but slightly inappropriate. The father of the bride is sentimental and long-winded, and someone's great-uncle launches into a speech about the Crimean War for reasons nobody understands. Photographs are taken. Long, uncomfortable affairs requiring everyone to stand perfectly still for what feels like several lifetimes. Children fidget, the bride's veil starts to wilt, and the groom's moustache makes its own bid for freedom. Finally, there's dancing. A stately waltz if you're traditional, or a surprisingly energetic polka if you're trying to distract from the incident with the punch bowl. By the end of the day, you're exhausted, slightly deaf from the band, and covered in enough rice to feed a Victorian orphanage. But you made it. You've survived the spectacle, the relatives, the speeches, and the moustache wax. In the annals of Victorian romance, that's a triumph worthy of a tiered cake and 1,000 blurry photographs. After all that anticipation, you finally have some alone time. Let's just say, Victorian love is a lot more awkward shuffling than sweeping passion. Someone's definitely wearing the wrong socks. The wedding night looms over every Victorian marriage like a plot twist in a Gothic novel. Guests have spent the entire day dropping hints, winking slyly, and giving unsolicited advice, sometimes accompanied by diagrams, just in case you've missed the point. Now, at last, the door is closed, the room is still, the candles flicker, you're alone together, except for the army of embroidered cushions and the hovering ghost of collective family expectation. Everything about this night has been built up by society to mythic proportions. You're expected to transform instantly from polite acquaintances into lovers, while still adhering to an etiquette manual the size of a Dickens novel. No pressure. You both stare at each other, equal parts nervous, exhausted, and slightly punch-drunk on leftover fruitcake. Victorian nightwear is the first obstacle. The bride, swaddled in enough lace and ribbon to upholster a chaise, finds herself contending with 27 buttons, 3 hidden ties, and an underlayer known only as the mystery petticoat. The groom, meanwhile, realizes his new monogrammed nightshirt was starched within an inch of its life, and is suddenly aware that at least one sock is striped and possibly borrowed. This is not the passionate unveiling of romantic fantasy. This is the slow, painstaking unwrapping of 2 very nervous parcels. The room itself isn't helping. The bridal suite, decorated with florid wallpaper and an audience of porcelain dolls, feels less like a boudoir and more like the set of a children's ghost story. You're not sure whether to dim the lamps or light more candles. Either way, someone will stub their toe. The bed, piled high with blankets and family heirlooms, groans under the weight of both expectations and a surprising number of doilies. Conversation is hesitant. "Did you enjoy the soup?" you ask, because it's the last safe topic you can remember. Your new spouse, equally at a loss, offers, "I liked your cousin's toast." The shorter one, small talk is the order of the night, because actual talk about feelings, desires, or heaven forbid biology has been strictly taboo for the last 20 years. If you're lucky, you both remember to compliment each other's hair. Eventually the moment arrives. There is some confused shuffling. One of you tries to say something poetic, but it comes out sounding more like a weather report. You bump elbows, giggle nervously, and discover that Victorian beds are a fraction of the size you'd hoped for. In the tangle of blankets, petticoats, and socks, you manage to find each other, but it's all more endearing than epic. For many Victorians, the wedding night was as much about negotiation as passion. If you were lucky, you'd spent time together before marriage, at least enough to share a sense of humour and a working knowledge of where elbows go. For others, this was the first truly private moment, and the awkwardness was legendary. You'd both heard stories, some true, most invented by elderly aunts, about what was supposed to happen, but theory rarely survived contact with reality. Afterward, there's relief, tinged with laughter, embarrassment, and a sort of dazed pride. You survived. No swooning, no fainting, and nothing caught on fire, except perhaps your face. There's a camaraderie to it. You and your spouse have crossed an invisible threshold together, and the worst that can be said is that someone's nightcap ended up on the mantelpiece. In the grand tradition of Victorian romance, the wedding night is less about perfection and more about surviving the moment, mismatched socks and all. It's the first of many shared absurdities, the beginning of a story you'll retell with increasing exaggeration over the years. If you're very lucky, you fall asleep side by side, grateful, relieved, and already planning which cousin to blame if anyone asks for details. And so ends the night, not with fireworks, but with warmth, laughter, and the gentle snoring of 2 people who know that real love is built not on grand gestures, but on surviving the awkward bits together. Now the real adventure starts. Life as a Victorian couple, balancing affection, societal pressure, and a truly frightening amount of silverware. You'll argue over napkin folding and try not to let the cat eat the aspic. The first morning of married life dawns with all the subtlety of a brass band. There's tea to be brewed, curtains to be drawn, and an entire household waiting to judge your every move. As a newly minted Victorian couple, you are expected to slip seamlessly into domestic harmony, even though neither of you can quite remember where the sugar is kept or who, exactly, is responsible for winding the clock. Gone are the days of stolen glances and secret notes. Now you're navigating the twin minefields of household management and social expectation. The romantic haze of courtship is replaced by a fog of practicalities. Inventorying the linen cupboard, counting spoons, and learning that setting the table is a competitive sport among your married friends. The Victorians took dining etiquette very seriously. Each meal is a parade of forks, knives, and mysterious implements whose only purpose seems to be keeping you humble. You'll spend hours debating whether the fish fork goes left or right, and who is responsible if Great-Aunt Clarissa's pudding spoon is found in the gravy boat. As for the laundry list, literally, there is one. Victorian clothing is a full-time job for at least 3 people, and the laundry itself a battleground. Petticoats, cravats, and lace collars are in constant rotation, all needing starch, mending, and the occasional exorcism. Your first serious marital disagreement will probably be about whether to use lavender water or plain soap, closely followed by an argument about whose turn it is to wring out the socks. Domestic bliss is occasionally interrupted by outside expectations. Neighbours, relatives, and the ever-watchful Mrs. Peabody will scrutinize your relationship for signs of either discord or excessive enthusiasm. The goal is to appear affectionate, but not improper, harmonious, but not suspiciously cheerful. Anything more than a polite nod in public is considered showy. Anything less, and someone will send a sympathy note. Even the family cat seems to have opinions, especially when it comes to sleeping on your best lace pillowcases. Daily life is a study in contrasts. On good days, there are shared jokes over breakfast and long walks in the garden, hands brushing like characters in a 3-volume novel. On bad days, there are debates about budget, the proper number of ferns for the sitting room, and whether or not the asparagus tongs are actually necessary for human survival. Sometimes you communicate in affectionate banter. Other times, it's terse notes delivered via the household staff, with messages like, "Please refrain from rearranging my collection of commemorative teaspoons." And then there are the guests. Marriage means hosting an endless rotation of visitors, friends, cousins, and people you barely remember from childhood, all descending for tea and gossip. You master the art of polite conversation, nodding along as stories are retold for the umpteenth time and resisting the urge to hide in the pantry. If you're lucky, your spouse is your co-conspirator, exchanging glances and subtle grins as Uncle Bernard launches into his annual monologue about the Crimean War. Amid the chaos, genuine partnership emerges. You become a team, tackling chores, finances, and family politics together. There are small, silly rituals that grow over time, arguing over who makes the best toast, trying to sneak an extra biscuit when the other isn't looking, or inventing private codes to communicate across crowded dinner parties. These moments, more than any grand romantic gesture, become the glue that holds your marriage together. Of course, not every day is a triumph. Some evenings you go to bed annoyed about dusting or the mysterious disappearance of the good napkins, but there's comfort in knowing that tomorrow you'll wake up, pour the tea, and try again, side by side, in a world of endless lists, relentless etiquette, and the very real threat of finding a cat hair in your aspic. Victorian marriage, part romance, part bureaucracy, all adventure. And if you can survive the laundry, the silverware, and the in-laws, you can survive anything. Marital bliss, Victorian style, means maintaining the facade of happiness at all costs. Smiling for the neighbours, rehearsing loving glances, and, if all else fails, owning the largest potted fern in your street. In the Victorian age, love is as much a spectacle as it is an emotion. Your marriage is on public display from the moment you walk out the front door, arm in arm, faces arranged in gentle smiles so practiced they could be carved in marble. The neighbours peer out from behind lace curtains, evaluating everything: your posture, your hats, your apparent level of mutual devotion, and most importantly, the greenery in your front window. Appearances are everything. Breakfast is the opening act. Even if you spent the previous night debating the ethical implications of asparagus tongs, by morning you're sitting together at the table, passing marmalade with the air of newlyweds in a sentimental painting. Your conversation is light, comments about the weather, last night's sermon, or the latest scandal involving Mrs. Tillingham's runaway turkey. You speak in code, with, "Would you care for more tea?" meaning, let's never discuss last night's napkin incident again. The parlour is your stage, and visitors are the audience. When guests arrive, you present the ideal of harmonious matrimony: perfectly coordinated attire, synchronized laughter, and the ability to hand each other biscuits with a choreography that would impress the royal ballet. If you must argue, do so in the garden, preferably behind the rose bushes, or, Failing that, by communicating via aggressive pruning. Household decor is part of the act. The best homes are overflowing with signs of prosperity and taste, gleaming silver, spotless doilies, and of course, the crowning glory, an enormous, thriving fern. The size and health of your potted fern is a direct reflection of your domestic stability. A wilting fern invites whispers about trouble at home. A flourishing specimen earns you respect, envy, and possibly a feature in the local gardening society's newsletter. Social events are an ongoing test of your performance. At dinners, you are expected to smile affectionately at your spouse across the table, laugh at their jokes, no matter how many times you've heard them, and agree about everything from the temperature of the soup to the moral lessons of the latest serialized novel. Even the way you sit together in the pew on Sunday is a statement. Close enough to signal unity, but not so close that Mrs. Peabody must fan herself with the hymnal. Letters, too, play a role. Your correspondence with friends and family is filled with loving anecdotes and references to your harmonious domestic life. Charles and I spend our evenings reading poetry, you write, tactfully omitting the fact that Charles mostly snores and you've memorized every verse out of sheer boredom. If you receive guests from out of town, your displays of unity are amplified. No one must suspect that you once disagreed about the correct folding of a napkin. Behind closed doors, of course, reality returns. Perhaps you bicker over the best way to polish the candlesticks, or whose turn it is to entertain Cousin Millicent. But out in public, the show must go on. Sometimes it feels like everyone you know is performing the same script, improvising where necessary, and quietly hoping their own ferns don't start to droop. Yet there's an odd comfort in the routine. Keeping up appearances, for all its absurdity, can become its own form of togetherness. You learn to communicate with glances, to share silent jokes when someone compliments your radiant happiness, and to support each other through the endless parade of teas, dinners, and surprise visits from the vicar. In the end, Victorian marriage is as much about partnership in performance as it is about genuine affection. If you can maintain your composure when the soup is cold, the fern is shedding, and the neighbours are watching, well, that's love, Victorian style, polished, persistent, and always ready for an encore. Years later, you find a stash of old letters, some from past admirers, others from your spouse, a few from people you still don't remember. Nostalgia, regret, and the faint suspicion you were always a little bit dramatic. It's a rainy afternoon, the sort that invites both tea and introspection. You're rummaging through a forgotten drawer, looking for that spare button or the embroidery scissors you swore you'd only lent to Aunt Bertha, when your hand brushes against a faded ribbon. Out comes a battered box, stuffed with envelopes in every shade of cream and sepia, love letters, remnants of a dozen emotional thunderstorms. You settle into your armchair, the sound of rain, a soundtrack for memory, and begin to sift through the paper time machine of your past. Each letter brings its own rush of memory. The handwriting varies. One careful and spidery, another flamboyant, packed with flourishes and ink blots. Here's a note from your first crush, extolling the beauty of your charming dimples and begging forgiveness for spilling punch on your new boots at the harvest ball. There's a florid declaration from an overly ambitious suitor who, with the confidence of a man armed with a new bottle of cologne, offered you his undying affection and a subscription to the Times. Some letters are tinged with regret, the sort that reminds you how intensely you felt at 17, how convinced you were that a delayed reply was a sign of cosmic injustice, how a single word could set your heart fluttering or plummeting. You cringe fondly at your own replies, so earnest and filled with phrases like eternal longing and my soul's only companion. In retrospect, you wonder if you were ever in love or simply enamored with the idea of longing itself. There are, inevitably, a few letters from people you barely remember. Yours in undying affection, Reggie says one. The only Reggie you recall being the neighbour's terrier. Some correspondence trails off in the middle, as if the romance itself fizzled out between the post and the reply. There's a thrill in realizing how many little stories you starred in, some passionate, some awkward, most best left in the past. The letters from your spouse are another matter entirely. The early ones, stiff, polite, hedging bets on proper affection, slowly warm over time. Their language becomes softer, their jokes more inside. There's the letter that accompanied a single rose, written on the day of your engagement, another sent during a temporary separation, worrying about the cat and the status of the ferns. These missives are the real keepsakes, the building blocks of a life lived together, full of everyday worries and gentle reassurance. As you read, nostalgia gives way to perspective. The heartbreaks that once seemed insurmountable now make you laugh. The rivalries and crushes fade, replaced by gratitude for having survived the endless, theatrical circus of Victorian romance. If you're honest, you're still a little dramatic. You did, after all, just spend 20 minutes sighing over a letter from someone whose name you can't recall. You think of all the hours spent waiting for the post, the careful folding of paper, the secrets hidden in loops and flourishes. There's a sweetness to the ritual, even if it often led to disappointment or, worse, a public reading by a relative. You remember the pride in receiving a letter, the hope in sending one, and the sense that every word written was a step toward some unknown future. Eventually, you tuck the letters back in their box, a little lighter for having revisited your younger, more melodramatic self. You're grateful for the love that lasted, and even for the love that didn't. Without those old flames, each letter, each half-remembered suitor, each sighing verse, you wouldn't have the story you have today. So you set the box aside, pour another cup of tea, and marvel at the fact that, after all these years, love letters still have the power to make you smile, wince, and occasionally blush. Victorian romance might have been complicated, but at least it was never boring. Eventually, every Victorian couple faces the twilight years, less passionate, more joint pain. Love lingers in the quiet moments, shared tea, slow walks, and the annual competition for who can sigh the loudest at sunset. Time, like an overly enthusiastic vicar, marches on. You and your spouse have survived the early days of mismatched socks, marathon dinners with the in-laws, the mysterious disappearance of half the silver spoons, and more than one public scandal involving a potted fern. Now, the wild drama of courtship and the strict choreography of early marriage give way to a quieter, gentler companionship. The pace of life has slowed. Gone are the frantic dances and the endless social obligations. No more rushing to dress for the fifth ball of the week, or feigning enthusiasm for yet another engagement announcement over tepid punch. Now you move at a more dignified speed. Your daily walks are not so much for exercise as for the pleasure of arm-in-arm ambling, offering each other support against the uneven paving stones and reminiscing about days when you could actually see your toes. Tea, which was once the centerpiece of society gossip and matchmaking, is now a private ritual. You've perfected the art of brewing it to mutual satisfaction, strong enough to wake the dead, but gentle on aging stomachs. The conversation flows in familiar patterns. News of distant relatives, the latest escapades of the neighbour's cat, and whether this afternoon's weather counts as bracing or medically inadvisable. You share quiet laughter, subtle glances, and, on especially daring days, an extra biscuit to be hidden from the grandchildren. The aches and pains of age are part of the package. Lumbago, rheumatism, and the gentle creak of joints become the soundtrack to your days. The love letters are fewer, but the companionship is deeper, a kind of partnership built on 1,000 small accommodations. You have an unspoken agreement about who gets the good cushion and who remembers to wind the clock. There are regular debates about the proper temperature for the sitting room, usually settled by whichever of you can best wield a shawl or a well-timed glare. Your home reflects a life lived together. The same lace curtains hung for decades, a mantel crowded with faded photographs, and a garden that has survived generations of children, pets, and questionable landscaping decisions. The cat, a fixture for as long as anyone can remember, alternates laps depending on who offers the best crumbs. Every object in the house carries a story, and you two remember every one, even if you occasionally disagree about the details. The legacy of lace is more than just fabric. It's the quiet bond built through years of shared chores, private jokes, and surviving every awkward family dinner. It's found in the easy way you finish each other's sentences, in the practiced silence that says more than words, and in the daily ritual of looking for misplaced spectacles, usually found in the other's pocket. Even the loudest sunset sighs become a kind of affectionate contest, a gentle way of marking time and outlasting the day. Sometimes, as the shadows lengthen, you'll sit together in your favorite chairs, hands intertwined, content in the kind of peace that comes only from decades of persistence, patience, and an occasional good-natured bicker about the proper placement of antimacassars. The world outside continues to whirl, but inside, there's a sense of sanctuary, proof that love can weather every season, outlast every trend, and even survive the odd incident with a ruined pudding. In the end, growing old together Victorian style is less about grand gestures and more about endurance, humour, and the daily choice to be kind, especially when your spouse is hogging the last shortbread. It's not just about lace and longevity, it's about the legacy of laughter and a life well shared, right down to the last sigh at sunset. Summer in Victorian England means packing up your feelings, your extended family, and enough heavy garments to sink a paddle steamer, all for a day at the seaside. Courtship here is an advanced game of try not to get sunburned or accidentally reveal your wrists. Romance is conducted at a safe distance, shouting over the wind while your aunt haggles for a lukewarm oyster. If you manage a secret smile while dodging seagulls and seaweed, congratulations, you're practically engaged. Nothing tests the strength of Victorian love quite like a trip to the seaside, a ritual both exhilarating and mildly terrifying. It begins with an epic logistical feat. Organizing your entire family, the family's friends, and several mysterious companions whose main function seems to be making everything 10 times more complicated. You load up the carriage with baskets of provisions, stacks of blankets, and at least 3 parasols per person, just in case the sun even thinks about peeking through the clouds. Arriving at the coast is a marvel in itself. The air is bracing, which is code for wildly uncomfortable. The wind is determined to invert every hat, and the beach is mostly made of pebbles that will find their way into your shoes for weeks. The entire Victorian population of your county seems to have gathered in one spot, creating a sea of striped bathing tents, excited children, and chaperones with eagle eyes and cast-iron stomachs. If you're in love, or simply considering the possibility, you must navigate this obstacle course with all the delicacy of a seasoned diplomat. A stroll along the promenade is your one sanctioned opportunity for courtship, provided you can keep pace with your beloved without being bowled over by Mrs. Peabody's sunshade or a runaway beach ball. Conversation is as formal as ever. "The sea looks lively today," you shout, as a wave splashes dangerously close to your polished boots. "Yes, quite lively," comes the reply, as both of you carefully avoid looking directly at each other's ankles. Romantic gestures are strictly limited. Sharing a peppermint stick is considered risque. Accidentally brushing hands while helping someone over a rock is practically a proposal. If you're especially daring, you might offer your companion a shell you've found, a time-honored Victorian symbol for "I noticed you," and also this shell, swoon. The day's activities are a comedy of manners. Bathing machines trundle into the surf like miniature wooden fortresses, designed to spare everyone the sight of a bare elbow. Your relatives insist on a group picnic, which quickly devolves into a battle between family, seagulls, and a particularly persistent crab. Aunt Mildred retells her story of that time in Scarborough for the 12th summer in a row, while your younger siblings construct elaborate sand castles in hopes of impressing someone, anyone, important. Meanwhile, you and your intended do your best to exchange meaningful glances between sips of tepid lemonade. Each smile is a minor miracle. Each moment of accidental solitude a cause for alarmed speculation by every chaperone within a 20-foot radius. When the weather inevitably turns, rain being the only true guarantee of an English summer, everyone packs up and dashes for shelter, arms full of soggy sandwiches and the sense that they have had a lovely day. Truly, by the time you're headed home, hair full of salt, pockets full of stones, you realize you've survived the most British courtship gauntlet of them all. No love song was sung, no scandalous wrist revealed, but you did manage a laugh together over Aunt Mildred's umbrella blowing into the sea. In Victorian romance, that counts for everything. And so, as the sun sets and the last parasol is folded away, you sit side by side in the rattling carriage, sharing quiet exhaustion and the certainty that, if you can find joy together in damp wool, shrieking gulls, and Aunt Mildred's never-ending stories, your love might just stand the test of time, or at the very least, another day at the seaside. Think texting is hard? Try communicating your feelings through bouquets. Every flower has a coded meaning, and misreading a daisy could start a duel or a lifelong misunderstanding. You meant to say affection, but the bouquet you sent actually means I regret ever meeting your parrot. By the time you decode the reply, half the town is gossiping, and your suitor is suddenly betrothed to the mayor's daughter, all because you included a buttercup. Welcome to the dizzying world of floriography, where every petal is a syllable, every stem a question mark, and one ill-timed pansy can destroy your romantic prospects faster than a chaperone with binoculars. The Victorian obsession with the language of flowers turns even the simplest gesture, offering a bouquet, into an act of perilous diplomacy. Forget love notes. Here, your only chance to woo your beloved is to assemble a handful of botanical metaphors and pray the message doesn't get lost somewhere between the violets and the verbena. It starts, innocently enough, with the desire to impress. You study the floral dictionaries, because, yes, there are many. Memorize the meanings: roses for love, daisies for innocence, lilies for purity, and, confusingly, marigolds for both despair and optimism depending on the arrangement. You even write yourself a cheat sheet, but somewhere between irises, faith, and snapdragons, presumptuousness, it all blurs together. The pressure mounts. You do not want to become the cautionary tale everyone whispers about over tea. Composing the bouquet is like building a puzzle where each piece might explode. You carefully select tulips for declaration, not knowing that in your suitor's edition of the flower dictionary, tulips mean hopeless infatuation and bad breath. You tuck in a buttercup, which you think means cheerfulness, only to learn it actually translates as childishness or I would not trust you with a horse. The florist, sensing your panic, offers helpful suggestions, most of which sound suspiciously like traps. Delivery is another ordeal. You dispatch the bouquet via footman, along with a note so vague it might as well be written in code, with fondest regards and admiration for your taste in bonnets. Your beloved receives the flowers, consults her own volume of floral sentiments for the discerning lady, and promptly faints, convinced you've just proposed marriage, challenged her cousin to a duel, or, worst of all, insulted her parrot's lineage. The household is thrown into turmoil. The butler delivers the bouquet to the wrong person. The family dog eats the violets, shifting the intended meaning from everlasting love to I hope you like digging in the garden. The aftermath is immediate and merciless. Gossip erupts like a volcanic eruption of rose petals. Did you hear what he said with those chrysanthemums? I always suspected she was the buttercup type. Everyone has an opinion, and none of them are remotely accurate. The local vicar is drawn in to mediate. The mayor's daughter, seeing her chance, suddenly receives a bouquet of her own, irises, and a single, ambiguously placed thistle, setting off a new round of speculation. Meanwhile, you scramble to undo the damage, sending clarifications. Please disregard the buttercup. But by now, the narrative has spun so far out of control you half expect to find yourself engaged, banished, or asked to sponsor the next flower show as a form of penance. Eventually, the dust and the pollen settles. You manage to arrange a face-to-face conversation. No flora, no subtext, just awkward laughter and a mutual agreement to stick to handwritten notes or, better yet, straightforward sentences. The mayor's daughter finds happiness elsewhere, possibly with the florist. The parrot remains unoffended, and you become a local legend, the one who nearly brought down Victorian society with a buttercup and an innocent tulip. In the end, you learn that the language of love is complicated enough without needing a horticultural translation guide. Sometimes, the safest bouquet is just one big fern with a card that says, "I like you." No hidden meaning. Promise. Sometimes, the heart wants what society absolutely does not. Crossing class lines for romance in Victorian times is a high-stakes sport involving side doors, cryptic notes, and the very real threat of being fired for improper doily placement. If you catch feelings for someone who polishes the silver, prepare for endless complications, dramatic whispered conversations in the pantry, and at least one instance of hiding in a broom closet while the vicar visits. It all begins with a glance that lingers too long over the breakfast tray. Maybe you notice the way the new maid laughs, or how the butler's eyes sparkle with secret knowledge when he hands you the mail. In most households, the rules are carved in stone, or at least inscribed in the family copy of Debrett's peerage. The staff is to remain invisible, their lives happening in the silent hours before and after the gentry sweep through the halls. But where there are rules, there is always the irresistible urge to break them, especially when love, or something thrillingly like it, is involved. Victorian society takes the boundaries between classes very seriously. Every interaction is a tightrope walk. A misplaced compliment could spark gossip that travels faster than the household cat. A touch, however fleeting, could send shockwaves through the staff hierarchy. Mrs. Peabody in the scullery would have opinions, and you can be sure the butler, that grandmaster of discretion, will know every detail by lunchtime. Nothing escapes the house gossip grapevine. If you wish to pursue a forbidden romance, you'll need creativity, nerves of steel, and a working knowledge of every back stairwell in the house. Communication is a puzzle of glances across the breakfast room, coded notes hidden in the folds of laundry, and accidental meetings in the garden when everyone else is distracted by news of a runaway pig. Whispered conversations are conducted in corners, always one ear straining for the approach of heavy footsteps or the clatter of tea trays. There's a delicious tension in secrecy. Every word carries weight. Will you be attending the picnic? Takes on layers of meaning. Even a simple good morning is a tiny act of rebellion. The pantry, usually a battleground for jam and biscuits, becomes a romantic hideout, provided you can avoid the undercook, who is constitutionally opposed to romance of any kind. Of course, danger lurks around every doorknob. If caught, the consequences range from icy banishment to abrupt unemployment, and possibly a scandal that will ripple through the county for years. Rumours of secret liaisons are the currency of drawing rooms, are whispered. Did you hear about Miss Alderton and the footman? They can ruin a reputation faster than an overturned chamber pot. For those who dare, the moments of connection are brief but electric. A hand lingering a fraction too long over the silver polish, a stolen smile as the family gathers for dinner, a promise tucked inside the folds of a freshly laundered napkin. Your romance exists in the gaps, between duty and desire, between the chiming of the household clock and the next round of tea. It is fueled by the danger of discovery, the thrill of rule-breaking, and the stubborn hope that love might, for once, outrun the rumour mill. Still, every romantic victory is tinged with uncertainty. Will your secret be safe? Will society forgive, or at least forget? Or will you find yourselves on opposite sides of the great Victorian class divide, one polishing candlesticks and the other staring out the window, remembering how it felt to brush hands under the dinner table? Sometimes, against all odds, these romances find their own ending, whether in the quiet contentment of a shared cottage far from judging eyes, or simply as a cherished, bittersweet memory of glances and whispers. And if you're caught, well, at least you'll have lived a story worth repeating, even if you have to tell it from the pantry, behind a stack of spotless doilies, while the vicar tries not to look surprised. In a world where brushing sleeves can get you written up in someone's diary, public displays of affection are more scandalous than a bank robbery. A gloved handshake is steamy. Sharing an umbrella? Positively indecent. Even walking too close can trigger a minor social panic. Love is a battlefield, and your enemy is anyone with binoculars and strong opinions about propriety. Welcome to the gauntlet of Victorian romance, where every gesture is a potential scandal and the simple act of holding hands requires both strategy and plausible deniability. Forget modern flirtation or the casual touch. Here, the rules of engagement are strict, and every public encounter is conducted under the silent, watchful gaze of half the county. There are 1,000 ways to ruin your reputation before you ever even exchange a proper smile. It begins the moment you leave the house. As a Victorian couple, your every move is observed by neighbours, chaperones, and that one old man who has stationed himself behind the hedge with a pair of opera glasses. If you so much as look at each other for too long, you risk becoming the subject of furious diary entries and possibly a moralising letter to the parish magazine. Your safest bet is to keep your conversation light, your posture stiff, and your distance measurable in inches. Even the air between you feels charged. The stakes are highest during the promenade. This is your sanctioned time to walk out with your beloved, but only under the supervision of someone who believes romance peaked with the invention of the doily. You might wish to link arms, but unless you're dodging a runaway horse or an especially large puddle, even that is suspect. A chaperone trails just behind, clutching her reticule, ready to step in should your elbows venture too close together. You've never been so aware of your own limbs. If you dare to share an umbrella, you'll never hear the end of it. "Did you see?" whispers Mrs. Tillingham. They huddled together under the same brolly, and it wasn't even raining that hard. Congratulations. You've made the front page of the local gossip circuit. Your umbrella choice will be dissected for weeks, and any attempt to explain will be met with knowing glances and thinly veiled references to the slippery slope. Hand-holding is the Mount Everest of Victorian romance. Possible, but rarely attempted without prior arrangement and at least 2 layers of gloves. To touch hands in public is to declare your intentions to the world and risk being immortalized in the next round of family anecdotes. Even brushing sleeves by accident is cause for alarm, often resulting in a flurry of handkerchiefs and an urgent consultation with the household's etiquette manual. If you accidentally bump shoulders while sitting on a park bench, expect an outraged flock of elderly relatives to descend upon you before you can say "I do." And then there's the issue of proximity. Walk too close, and tongues will wag. Too far, and your affection will be questioned. You must master the subtle art of synchronized strolling, close enough to share a whispered joke, far enough apart to maintain plausible innocence. A successful Victorian courtship is measured in inches, not miles. Despite the restrictions, there's a certain thrill to all this restraint. Every glance, every stolen moment, feels like a minor rebellion. You communicate through coded smiles, shared laughter, and the occasional heart-stopping touch when you think no one is watching. Someone always is. The intensity of these small, forbidden gestures becomes the stuff of legend, passed down through family stories long after the umbrella in question has been retired to the attic. Sometimes, after successfully navigating an entire afternoon without a single indiscretion, you'll exchange a look with your beloved that says, "We did it. We fooled them all." It's a quiet victory, a triumph of subtlety in a world obsessed with surfaces. Public displays of affection may be a crime, but love, for all its rules and restrictions, always finds a way to reach across the gap. One gloved hand, one shared umbrella, one perfectly scandalous smile at a time. So tonight, as you settle into your gloriously unsupervised bed, no chaperones lurking, no lace collar threatening to cut off your circulation, and definitely no fear of your love letter being intercepted by Aunt Mildred, maybe spare a gentle thought for our Victorian friends. The ones who braved an emotional obstacle course of calling cards, fan signals, and the ever-present threat of public scandal, all in the name of love. Who knew that romance could involve so many ferns, so much stationery, and quite so many sighs by candlelight? Because for every awkward tea party, every accidentally insulting bouquet, and every heroic attempt to flirt without actually moving your lips, there was genuine hope. Hope that even in a world of rules and ruffles, two people might actually connect, if only for a moment, or a lifetime, or at least until the next poetry reading. So as you drift off tonight, maybe be quietly grateful for the ease of a simple goodnight text, for partners who don't judge you by your calling card, and for love that doesn't require parental approval and 6 signatures. The Victorians remind us that even in a world built on appearances and anxiety, real affection still found a way, though usually via 4 months of handwritten correspondence and a lot of very anxious glances. Rest easy, knowing that history's lovers endured, much so that you could enjoy your own romantic mishaps in peace, comfort, and hopefully far less lace. Because while the past was often ridiculous, it's also proof that humans, no matter the century, are stubborn, hopeful, and just a little bit absurd. Good night, and may your dreams be free of etiquette manuals